in the practice How We Act and Adapt. My name is Leslie Duthie, and I serve on the board of directors, and I'm the chair of the Publications Committee. And I'm happy that I will be the host for this session. We encourage you to join us with your camera on if you're able to do so. And we are sure that you're going to enjoy hearing from our next presenter, Trevor Smith. Our sponsors are very important to us, and you are important to them. Our sponsors for this year's conference include Green Jay Design, Pearls Premium, the Tick Suit, Coastal Maine Botanic Garden, Greenweaver Landscapes, Pearson Nurseries, and Black Earth Compost. We encourage you to visit their rooms and ask them questions regarding their service and products. Their support is essential to this event and to your connection, and interest is important to them. Please visit them during our breaks and ask your questions or set up an appointment to see what their services are, and thank them for supporting this conference. Trevor Smith is a good friend of mine, and we've known each other for years. We share a vision of ecological landscapes full of native plants. Trevor certainly is currently the design and education manager at Weston Nurseries in Massachusetts. He holds several landscape certifications and is a past, present, and current trustee of the Ecological Landscape Alliance. He's an amazing guy, very knowledgeable, and an award-winning regenerative landscape designer, specializing in green infrastructure, native plant design, habitat creation, and implementation of ecological design principles. He's passionate about the natural world and inspires his commitment, to sustainable landscaping practices in an era of climate change. Please join me in welcoming Trevor Smith.
Thank you so very much. That was a very warm introduction. I appreciate it. We have an hour together, so I'm going to just jump right into this. All right. So you, me, and climate change. Almost sounds romantic. It almost could be a Hallmark special. But no, not quite. So this in this presentation, because we have people from all over the country, and because I give such a presentation, what I would like to really focus on is the basics, because I honestly feel that it is our hubris, and because we forgot the basics and we got away from just simple nature, that we have made many of the mistakes we have. One of the pieces of that I would like to share with you, or something that I would like to implore of you, is understanding the immense responsibility of what it is you do. I don't care if you are a landscape maintenance professional, landscape construction professional, landscape designer, landscape architect, urban planner, whatever it might be. What we do shapes the land. What we do shapes the world around us. And I feel those in our profession do not take that seriously enough. What we do to the land, what you do to somebody's backyard, can improve or ruin the hydrology, could save a locally endangered species, or drive it straight into local extinction. We can totally wipe out the soil microbiome, or we can build it up to where it is so robust that we have disease and pest resistant plants. What we do is everything. And that starts with listening to our intuition. So much of land care, landscape design, I feel, is based around intuition. So we need to really pay attention and not overthink it, because if you go into a space, you will know what it needs, and you will know what needs to be done. But that starts with number two. And number two is we need to leave our egos aside when we approach a space, and we need to walk into a space, approach that space, see what it needs, feel what it needs, and act accordingly, and leave our egos out of it, leave our agendas out of it, and we can create beautiful landscapes even if we do so. But I suggest that next time you approach a site, you approach with a blank slate. So again, back to this presentation. There's a lot of basics in here. And it's like I said, I'm going to focus on the basics because that's what we need to know. I also am hoping that on the other end of this, I will be able to open your eyes and get you to think differently about your day-to-day practices, about your career in general, about how you look at and think about the land. I was just in a meeting with people who were recently evacuated from wildfires and people recently evacuated from flood. Let that sink in. That was September 3rd, 2021. That also happened again mid 2023. So twice in 3 years, I was on a Zoom call with people from around the country, some of whom were staying in hotels or with relatives because the area that they were in was burning, and others of whom were staying in hotels or in other areas with relatives because they got flooded away from their homes. So that's twice in 3 years that has happened, and it is starting to become the norm. This right here in 2021 was the catalyst to wanting to create or the beginnings of this presentation that you are about to see now, because that really struck me. The fact that, you know, you hear, I was hearing about all these things on the news, hearing about the storms down in Texas, hearing about the wildfires out in California. You hear about it, but then to actually be talking to somebody saying, yeah, I'm in Tennessee now in a hotel until we're allowed to get back. It's just like, that's heavy. And that's a whole lot when it starts to sink in. We all see this. We all think about climate change. We know that climate change is happening. Climate change is a thing. The problems, there's a couple problems or issues that come down with climate change. Some of us are just paralyzed with fear, and others of us are just not necessarily aware because it's not happening like we think. Like in looking at this map, this looks apocalyptic. And so some of people will look at this and be absolutely frozen. Other people will look at this and be like, yeah, but it's not like that yet. And so some people are not acting because they don't feel like it's time yet, because they're expecting some sort of apocalypse and oceans burning and everything else. And others are just absolutely paralyzed with fear. And as I said in the last slide, you know, people being moved around like that, we picture those, you know, picturing the apocalypse type scenario of climate change, picture like long lines of climate refugees. But we are within our own country and even within our own borders have become climate refugees. The temperatures in New England are warming faster than the rest of the world. And again, looking at this map, you'd be like, no, look at the continent of Africa. That's warming really fast. No, actually, New England, our little pocket, or my little pocket, depending on where you are, is warming faster than the rest of the world because of the ice sheets, because of Greenland, and because of the way the tides flow and the weather flows across the world and across the country. We're heating up relatively quickly. And the sad part of all of that is that it's never going to go back. It's never going to be the way it was. Now, I promise you right now that this is not a depressing talk, but we all need to get on the same page, and we just also need to just recognize the facts. Now, just because it's not going to go back, for those of you who are paralyzed in fear, you know, just because it's not going to go back doesn't mean that we can't do anything about it. Now, what we do, and what I would like to change your mind about, is we are all waiting for big companies. We are all waiting for the governments of the world to make sweeping changes, to actually get along and agree on something. And while we're doing that, New England itself is heating up relatively faster than the rest of the world, and the rest of the world is heating up. And, you know, the climate is not necessarily getting any better. The storms are getting worse and more unpredictable. And at least when I was growing up, the whole saying was April showers bring May flowers. April showers haven't brought May flowers in quite some time. In fact, May has been bringing her own flowers, and it has actually been a much wetter month than April. If somebody could please mute, I would appreciate it. Thank you. So what do we do now? So what do we do? We're paralyzed with fear, or we don't really feel like anything's happening. Well, I'm going to tell you, first thing we need to do is get past this. We need to stop thinking about this for a number of reasons. And if you want to send your money and support causes that support this polar bear right here, I think that's wonderful. However, as I was just saying, we can act right here, right now. We can act locally. What we need to do is start focusing on this. This is my backyard. This is not my backyard. Well, this is a heartbreaking photo, and I wish I could do something for this polar bear. I have no idea what the fate of this polar bear is, and this polar bear is not in my backyard. I can't affect that little ice flow right there that it's stuck on. I can affect the plants that I put in my backyard. I can affect change on the life of what could be my very favorite native bee, the green sweat bee. I think she's absolutely gorgeous. She is definitely probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite. This is what we need. I believe we need to focus on. This is where we can make the change. Where we can make the change immediately. And like I said, we can do that starting this season, just with our mindset. So if I'm going to send $20 somewhere, I can send it to that polar bear, or I could buy just one plant, put it in my backyard, and save this lovely lady right here. The days of landscaping for beauty are over. They're gone. We blew it. We got trusted with nice things, and we blew it. So, like I said, we need to leave ego out of it, because these days are over. We now have to create landscapes that are beautiful, and I want you to think about that when you're creating your landscapes. It's beautiful, and what? And what does it do for the hydrology? And what does it do for the soil? And what does it do for the native fauna, the native insects, the native birds? What are we doing for them? Our current approach to land care is akin to sending plastic, rubber, and steel into a factory without even knowing who works there or what they need, and hoping a car comes out the other side. We get drawn in the landscape. When I say we, the landscape community, the green industry gets drawn in, as well as all of our homeowner clients, by colorful bags with big promises. This is all you need. Spray this and it'll kill everything that you don't want. Put this on your garden and everything will be perfect. That's all you need. But we don't know. We've gone past, we just believe the bag. And we've gone past the knowing and understanding what our properties need. Do we need that 4-step? We might not need step number 3. We probably don't need the 4-step at all, because there's probably a whole lot in there that we do not need at all. So as tradespeople, as people in this industry, it is our responsibility and our duty to be the best we can in this industry. And that starts with understanding the landscapes that we manage, understanding the soils and the hydrology that we manage, understanding the plants and the plant communities that are there, and understanding the wildlife that also exists within that, whether it's a postage stamp in the city or whether it's rolling acres somewhere out in the country. We need to get this word a little clearer, because right now our view and our term of sustainability is extremely fuzzy. Currently, when we say sustainability, when we say we're acting sustainably, we think one thing, and inside in our hearts, we feel one way. But in reality, our actions speak differently. In reality, our actions towards sustainability and how we interpret the definition through action is, how much can I take before I break it? How far can I push this before it goes over the edge? That's really how we're treating sustainability. We might feel righteous, we might feel different inside, but that is exactly how we are acting when it comes to sustainability. So anybody who's ever seen me speak before has seen this slide before. Why? Because I feel it's the most important slide in the entire presentation. And this is why. If you look at our current climate, if you look at our current land care practices as having the flu, you do not want to sustain having the flu. You do not want to feel like crap indefinitely. No, you want to regenerate. So I consider myself a regenerative land care professional. Why? Because everything that I do, all of my methods and all of my practices and all of my designs are about regenerating Mother Nature, healing Mother Nature, and then getting out of the way, getting her systems back online, and then getting out of the way. So where I come from, sustainability is something that we want to get to. So again, back to the flu. You don't want to feel like crap indefinitely. You want to feel better, and then you want to sustain. So that's how I feel we need to approach the earth. I think we need to right some of the wrongs, set the systems right, get the system healthy again, and then just get out of the way. And that is regenerative land care. Eco land care is what some people call it. Eco land care to me focuses more on the plants, focuses on all of these things, but not necessarily on the healing practice. So I would like you to focus on the healing practice of Mother Earth, so that we can get her right, get her healthy, and then get out of the way. Ecosystem services. We need to get this term cleared up as well, because ecosystem services are the benefits people obtain from ecosystems. These include provisioning services such as food and water, regulating services such as flood and disease control, cultural services such as spiritual, recreational, and cultural benefits, and the supporting services such as nutrient cycling that maintain the conditions for life on Earth. These are all things that we can't do by ourselves. These are all things that we are spending a lot of money and a lot of time for tech to figure out, hoping that AI is going to figure this out and save us, hoping that we're going to create robots that can pollinate almond fields for us, or that will pollinate all of our food crops for us. That's a whole lot of money and a whole lot of effort when you could just boost that native bee population and have it all done for free. So in this presentation, I'm going to focus on soil, focus on water, and focus on plants and habitat. But we're going to start with soil. The answer is beneath our feet. We need to start with a healthy foundation. When I started in this industry, I did not think about soil much at all. I knew what it was. I knew it had to be healthy. I knew I had to make it right. But soil, to me, at the time, was very much math and science. That was not my strong suit in school, and it certainly wasn't my strong suit in those dozens of soil classes that I sat through. All that chemistry, all that math and science really hurt my brain and really made soil kind of intimidating and scary to me. It wasn't until I started relating soil and the soil microbiome to the gut microbiome. In fact, it wasn't until I started equating everything in nature to people in general, to people's health, to people's mentalities, to people's actions. Once I started doing all that, nature made total sense. And like I said, it's absolutely intuitive. So a great soil, a pretty healthy soil, has air, water, the middle component, sand, silt, and clay, and then that organic matter. One of the biggest unrecognized contributors to the climate crisis is compaction. If we focus on one thing this season, let it be on compaction, because compaction is ruining everything as far as the environment is concerned. With loss of that pore space, with loss of that air and water space, we lose our water holding capacity, and we lose that air and those air spaces that our plants need and that the soil life needs. Preventing compaction should be our greatest concern, because just running a bobcat over somebody's yard can compact those soils 2 to 3 feet down. Guess what you're not fixing with an aerator? 2 to 3 feet down. Only Mother Nature is really going to fix that. You can do some deep tine aeration, et cetera, but now we're talking heroic measures to fix the soil. We run into this all of the time. In fact, just to go off topic for just briefly, the picture on the right is what we don't see. We show up, this right here is basically concrete. That cat's been driving all over it. It's now compacted to say 2 feet. Now what they're going to do is they're going to put 4 to 6 inches of topsoil over that, plant a lawn, throw in some shrubs. Then the designers and architects among us will get called to this place, and the client will be like, it's a brand new house. And already I have water issues. That area and the lawn is completely wet and I don't know why, and nothing's growing properly. So we'll be like, don't you worry, we got it. And then we go in and we put in a landscape without thinking of what just happened, without thinking that 6 inches down is essentially dead concrete. So we need to be aware of this. So if you ever come to a house where they put on an addition, soil remediation absolutely has to be part of your plan, because you know they had an excavator back there. Anytime any construction is happening, you need to be aware of that. And that's why I said, don't go to a property with an agenda, because if I show up at this house, this $1.2 million house, once it's all done and it's all beautiful, I'm going to be like, this is awesome. It's a blank slate and I can do whatever I want, without thinking, oh, this is a brand new construction. I should check 6 inches down to see if I'm dealing with basic cement. Compaction affects hydrology, which is going to affect our plants, which is going to affect soil life, which is going to affect carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration can only happen with healthy roots. Carbon sequestration can only happen with healthy soil life. Carbon sequestration can only happen with all that pore space in there. and biodiversity. We're not going to have a diverse plant palette here. We're not going to have a diverse soil microbiome here when the soils are absolutely just degraded, depleted, and compacted. There's no place for anybody to live. I have never seen a nitrogen deficient plant in a natural ecosystem. Obviously, we're doing something wrong with agriculture that's interfering with the biological fixation of nitrogen. My friend Christine Jones was the one that said this, and it has stuck with me ever since. Because you don't. Out in nature, you don't see nitrogen deficient plants. So what are we doing wrong in agriculture? What are we doing wrong in horticulture and our land care that we have these nitrogen deficient plants? Obviously, there's something wrong with our soils. So I am absolutely an advocate for the soil carbon sponge. The difference between conventional and regenerative landscaping is whether or not you treat your soil like a living organism that constantly needs to be fed carbon via living roots. Like I said, we're about to get a little bit basic. Goes right back to this. This is what we forget about, the big exchange. Carbohydrates via photosynthesis for minerals and water. So these plants, all of our plants, share 20 to 80% of their carbohydrates, carbon, to feed the soil organisms, also carbon. This is carbon sequestration. Photosynthesis, creating sugar, sending that sugar into the ground to feed the soil organisms, to increase the volume of those soil organisms. Now we have a lot of carbon in the soil. Again, we're not thinking about this. I've talked to a lot of people, and we don't have time on this right now, but I've talked to a lot of people like, what do you envision carbon sequestration looking like? And people, you know, it essentially comes down to like, you know, plants like a straw sucking the carbon out of the air. And then I'm like, where does it go? And they're like, into the plant, into the soil, yeah. Like nobody really thinks about it. And like I said, it's way basic. For every 1 gram of carbon sequestered, that 1 gram holds 8 grams of water. That's huge when we're talking about drought. That's huge when we're talking about extremely wet seasons and flooding. Plants don't have the ability to digest soil. This is another thing that people get twisted. Like I said, keeping it basic, but it's all very true. Another friend of mine, Dan Kittredge, was the one that said this. And this is absolutely true. Again, these simple phrases, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. No, they don't. A root touching soil doesn't mean anything. The roots can only take up water-soluble nutrients. Those water-soluble nutrients are made by our friends right here. The nematodes, the protozoa, the fungi, the bacteria, all of that is what breaks down the sand, silt, and clay mineral components of the soil and makes them available. All of these guys are essentially sequestered carbon. So again, super basic, but something that when we're out there in the soil, when we're out there in the landscape, that we need to think about when we're thinking about carbon sequestration, when we're thinking about healthy soils. Because the healthier our soils, the healthier our plants. Healthy soil is full of life. In fact, the most biodiverse place on Earth. When the soil food web is activated, diverse plant and animals will return above ground to above ground habitats that can be restored. Again, it's all about the foundation. And starting with the soil, starting with healthy soil, starting to think about your soil, and starting to think about the soils that we encounter on a regular basis, like I said, with those homes. When I was talking about regeneration, we've blown it. We've ruined it. There's very few places that I have ever been where there is a healthy soil microbiome. That also said, oftentimes we'll come to a place and people will have an area that has just been wild or just been lawn. And they're like, I'd like to do something with this because it's got to be crap. I want to bring in all new soil. No. If that area has had living roots in it for the past, say, 8 years, that's actually going to be very healthy soil. And we don't need to probably take it out. We don't need to over amend it. I'm not an advocate for taking soil out ever. So we don't need to over amend it or anything else. For every 1 gram of soil organic matter, soils will hold 20 to 25,000 gallons of water per acre. This was absolutely proven true to me 2 years ago when we had a major drought here in the Northeast. My personal property and the properties that I managed, did they look pretty? Absolutely not. Did they suffer? Yes, they certainly did. However, the following year, this year, everything bounced back. Why? Because I had well aggregated soil. I had active soil life. I had huge water holding capacity in my soil. Once you get like above 6%, let's just say you have 6 or 8% soil organic matter, and you have well aggregated soil because you have great soil life. Your plants, your gardens, our landscapes can go 90 to 100 days between rainstorms. So you're like, well, Trev, that's great, but this past year it rained like every day but 4. That's true too. But when you have well aggregated soil, when you have that soil organic matter that I'm talking about right now, you have this water holding capacity. So now the water has a place to go rather than run off, rather than flood, rather than do damage. You have a vault, you have a actual vault to hold all of that water. And then gravity will take care of it. Gravity will keep pulling it down, but it will be in the soil. So whether we're having drought or whether we're having an extremely wet year, having healthy soils is paramount. Which then takes us to water, which I talk a lot about, which many of you have probably seen me talk about because it is my most discussed topic. This right here is a 700-year-old bubble. I have 2 things on my bucket list. I've only lived out one of them. One of them was to see the glaciers before they're gone, and that's where this 700-year-old bubble was taken. The other one is to see the monarchs before they're gone. I have a very simple bucket list. In fact, if I live it out, then I'm done, and I guess that's a very short life as well. However, those were really the only 2 things. I wanted to see the glaciers, and I want to see the monarchs before they're gone. So what's the problem? Well, since 1980, the number of extreme meteorological events has doubled. Some of you on here might remember that, some maybe not. There is a term that is starting, you may have heard it. It's becoming popular in our circles, not so much outside our circles, shifting baseline. I was actually just I was giving a talk last night regarding those bus shelters that I was talking about before we started. And I was talking about shifting baseline. And I was talking what it essentially, for those that don't know, is what you don't know, you don't know. And what you don't know, you won't miss. So if you grew up without fireflies and you don't see fireflies in the landscape, you're not going to miss them. And then the future generations aren't going to miss them. So those of us who can remember snowstorms, those of us who can remember fireflies, those of us who can remember bugs on our windshield when we were driving around on vacation or just going to the store, those are things that the current generations and the generations to follow aren't going to remember. So they're not going to miss it. So they're not going to know there's a problem. So I want you to pay attention to this slide just a little bit. Look at the evapotranspiration, 40 to 50%. Look at the surface runoff there on the left, less than 1%. Look at that interflow, 20 to 30%. This is a natural water cycle in a natural landscape. Before we went ahead and messed with it, before we went ahead and mansplained to Mother Earth, acting like we knew what we were talking about. This right here is a very simple watershed up in Maine, taken from ELA board member Irene Brady Barber. So when you're looking at this, the rain falls, all those trees, they just catch that water and they set that water to the ground. And then that water is absorbed into the ground, and that water will take weeks, days, hours to make its way all the way down here to this beautiful lake. It takes quite some time. Why? Mother Nature designed it that way. What we have is this. Look at that, 0 to 30% interflow, down from 20 to 30%. 20 to 30% evapotranspiration, down from 40 to 50%. 20 to 30% surface runoff, down from less than 1%. Mother Nature didn't design these waterways to handle the water that fast. Our brooks, our streams, our rivers, with all of this surface water running off and making its way into our waterways in a matter of minutes, not hours, not days, not weeks. We're talking minutes. It's making its way. And that is leading to what we call a flooding problem. One of the biggest things that we need to do with climate change is start calling things what they are. not worrying about the symptoms. It's just like healthcare. Don't worry about the symptoms. Worry about the cause of the problem. Worry about the root cause. In this picture, we don't have a flooding problem. There is an infiltration problem. If you call it what it is and deal with the actual issue, you will be able to solve what you're calling the problem. You will be able to cure the symptom. So right here is a poorly infiltrating area, not a flooded area. Like I said, this is how we deal with our water. A matter of minutes. This water right here and everything in it is making its way to the Mystic River. So where does it go? Well, we think it goes away. When we're dealing with a flooding problem, we're just sending the water away. If you can show me a way on a blue marble spinning in space, there isn't an away. When we're dealing with the symptoms, when we're dealing with flooding, and we're sending the water elsewhere, we're just sending the problem elsewhere, and probably compounding problems, because all that water running off the parking lot going right into the river is sending all of that stuff that is on the parking lot right into the river. We know all this. Again, it's all basic, but I need you to look at the world, look at the landscape, look at every storm through different eyes. Because this is how we deal with things right now. We're dealing with climate change. We deal with our stormwater problems. We deal with all of it like a teenager cleans their room. Or maybe some of you on here, no judging. But we just like kind of open the closet door and throw everything in the closet and then close it. And we're like, look, it's clean. We just kind of like send all that water down that drain and out to the river. And since the water's not there, we're like, look, we solved it. No more problems. No, that's not true. The problem's just elsewhere. We just put the problem out of sight. We just moved it elsewhere. So what is the answer? The answer is green infrastructure. And this is what I've been focusing on for over 15 years now. So green infrastructure is an approach to stormwater management that protects, restores, or mimics the natural water cycle, focusing on infiltration, focusing on slowing that velocity, reducing the volume, and slowing or infiltrating that runoff. So bioretention could be as small as a rain garden at somebody's house, or it could be a full-on bioretention system or bioswale. This is where the water is captured on the surface and allowed to then infiltrate within a 12 to 24-hour period into the ground. A rain garden, for many of you who have either done it or are wondering what's the difference, a rain garden is dealing with native soils. It's usually dealing with like one downspout on a single family home. A bioretention system or a bioswale is going to be dealing with like parking lot runoff or municipal runoff, massive amounts where we're talking thousands of gallons. Porous asphalt, very simple. This is how we're marrying kind of the green and the gray. This is where we take, okay, we need a driveway. Well, we're not going to use asphalt, so we're going to use permeable pavers. We're going to allow that water to infiltrate rather than run off and run down the street. And green roofs are definitely an urban solution. They never really, in the Northeast, they certainly never really took off. Mid-Atlantic, absolutely. Elsewhere in the country and certainly elsewhere in the world, they've taken off. They are just a tool in the toolbox. They are not the one and only answer, but in a very impervious area with very little green space, they certainly are. And you already heard me talk about the bus shelters. The beauty of the bus shelters is it's small steps, big impact. 60 square feet at a time. If we were to do all the bus shelters in the city of Boston, it would be over an acre. In a 1-inch rain event, also have a proposal in with the city of New York, who has 3,100 bus shelters, which is like 4 acres, which is like 116,000 gallons in a 1-inch rain event. So it's very small impact, 60 square feet at a time. But all of that small impact is going to slow that water from washing into our waterways. It's going to create habitat. It's going to create cooling. So green roofs are definitely a thing. I am a huge advocate on green roofs on a small scale. I'm a huge advocate of working all of these things on small scales into our lives. So I'm a big fan of rain gardens, and I'm a big fan of a rain garden doubling as a pollinator garden. Why not? Just use your favorite pollinator perennials and throw them in your rain garden, and there you go. And if we had that at everybody's house, we would be making a large impact. The city of Boston has now said that if you have any major renovation or any new construction, you have to keep all of the water on your property. If we had done that as a city 30 years ago, we would not have the flooding issues, the infiltration problem that we have right now. Very simple. So then we get into our plants and our habitat. And I suggest you plant the change you wish to see in the world. Just a pun or a play on the words, but this is what I want to see in the world. I've working on and I've created a curriculum through K through 5 where I go in and I teach the kids about native plants. And they each get assigned a native plant that's going to go in the native garden that we're going to create. So like somebody's assigned Solidago, somebody's assigned Monarda. I come back for the second one. It's the design phase. And each kid tells me about their plant, how much sun it needs, how tall does it get? And they also learn about their pollinator friends. And then on the third installation or the third visit is the actual installation of the garden where the kids come out and put it in. This all started because a school contacted me and they said, we'd like you to come to put in a pollinator garden. And I said, not on your life, because I'm just going to go. It's going to be, hey, let's plant plants with Trev. And then I go away and nobody cares about it. I said, we need to make it a learning event. We need to make it a learning something. And this school district was awesome. And we now have 5 in, and we're going to be putting another one in this year. So it's a number of visits starting in February right until May. And it's great. But the kids love this picture because I talk about a messy eater and I ask how many of them have a messy eater at home, and all the hands go up. So let me guess, natives. Yep, exactly. I was just talking about natives. So why natives? Well, pretty much preaching to the choir here. None of you really need to know why natives, but here are some of the reasons why. Greater climate resilience, especially when you're dealing with ecotypic natives. Habitat support. Think Yellowstone. It doesn't take much. And that's the beauty of the Yellowstone story, which many of you may know. But however, the beauty to me of the Yellowstone story is that a simple introduction of wolves then changed the waterways, then changed all the vegetation. It didn't just knock down, say, the elk and deer populations. That was the easy correlation between the two. The fact that the waterways changed and all these other things happened was the real beauty of all that story, as far as I'm concerned. Fewer inputs is absolutely true. And we all know that. It's not no maintenance, though. And we need to be very clear with our clients, because I get it a lot. People are like, I want a pollinator garden, or I want a meadow, or I want natives because you don't have to do anything to. No, that's not true. It's not true that you don't have to do anything. You have to do some things, and you definitely have to get them established. And then I explained to them, so Western Nurseries grows native plants. And I explained to them that even drought-tolerant native plants, like Rudbeckia, our Rudbeckia, while it's growing out at Western Nurseries, has a neonic-free but very bougie lifestyle. And so it needs to then get reintroduced to the garden. And then that's kind of like, I tell people, that's kind of like coming back from vacation. It's like you've been on a cruise where they're just like bringing you drinks and bringing you food, and you just got it all going on, and you can just relax all day. And then you get home and you remember that, oh yeah, I got to do work, I got to do laundry, I got to do this, I got to do that. You have to have that establishment period for that drought tolerant plant to then remember, oh yeah, I'm a drought tolerant plant and this is what I do. Because from the nursery, they got a very bougie lifestyle, like I said, at least at Weston. So it's one of the ways that I describe that, to my clients. Ultimately, yes, fewer inputs. Ultimately, yes, a lot less maintenance is needed, but it's never no maintenance and it's never no water ever. Healthy plants equal increased carbon cycling. We had talked about that. We're going to continue to talk about that, because when a plant is photosynthesizing at full capacity, it is pushing maximum amount of sugars into the soil. When it is doing that, you have very healthy hydrology and you have very healthy soil life. If your plant is being decimated, and I will touch on this in a little bit, but I may as well just touch on it now. If your plant is being decimated, something is wrong with your environment. It is the insect's job to remove the sick and weak plants. If your plant is being nibbled, that's one thing, and we don't mind that. But if your plant is being decimated, something is wrong with the environment. You have a sick plant with a weak immune system. Just like there are people among us who are sick all the time, there are plants that get sick all the time. And people with healthy immune systems and a healthy lifestyle don't get sick that often. It's exactly the same with plants. Think of the microbiome. You just need plants with good pre and probiotics, just like you need your pre and probiotics. Biodiversity, you don't need to be told this. However, I'm going to tell you this. Why? because this is what we need to explain to our clients. We also need to explain to our clients that it doesn't need to look like this. There may be some of you in the audience right now that see this and they're like, oh my God, that's way messy. This is why my clients don't like meadows. This is what meadows are. No. I have been installing now for the past 3 years, I guess, the composed meadow. It's taking all of these plants and giving a little more rhyme or reason, planting them in swaths, planting them in blocks. The composed meadow does really well. If I have a client that says, I don't want native plants, I say, okay, how about this? I'm going to install an extremely low maintenance garden, especially once it gets established, that's going to bloom from, say, April to October. And all you have to do is just cut it back in the spring. Once the weather warms up, you just cut it back in the spring, and then it'll just come back and do its thing. They say, yes, I want that. Okay. And then I put in the native plant garden that I was going to put in the first time. People just have it twisted. They think a native plant garden is going to be messy. So sometimes, like with kids, if they like their vegetables, then great, we're having vegetables. If not, we hide the vegetables. And that's exactly how I treat landscapes and native plants. Sometimes if you love native plants, then great, here are your native plants. And if not, well, I'm just going to tuck them in here. I'm just going to hide them. We'll pour some ranch dressing on it and call it a day. So that's kind of how, the approach that we need. Now, with the biodiversity, it's extremely important for every single reason that we've touched on. So with this biodiversity, above ground, we have so many different insects and so many different things happening that if you have an unwanted insect, otherwise known as a pest, but I'm working very hard to take pest out of my vernacular because they're not doing anything wrong. So if you have an unwanted insect, chances are there is another insect within this environment right here that will eat that insect for you. So above ground, you have a lot going on. You also have, because you have a diversity of insects, you're going to have a diversity of, megafauna or bird life or anything like that. Now, on another level, let's go down a little bit lower past the plants. Let's go to the roots. In the roots, we have different root depths, a biodiversity in root depths. Those roots are pulling up all of those nutrients from different depths in the soil, which then if you leave the leaves and leave your stems, all of those nutrients are then going to be available. You will have massive amounts of fertilizer available to the next year's plants. Also, with these root depths, you are now with those exudates feeding life at so many different depths in the soil. So you're creating those aggregates, you're creating that pore space that we were talking about. And then the water is following those roots through the soil. So now you're getting water deeper and deeper into the soil, into those aggregates. So why do we want biodiversity? Why do we want to just not only think of plants and plant heights, but let's think of roots and root depths when we're designing, and make sure that we have a variety of root depths as well as a variety of plant color, height, texture, etc. Everything above ground, but we can't just make it pretty. So we have to start thinking about biodiversity in the landscape with our plants, multiple plants, no monocultures. Everybody on here knows that, but you probably haven't been thinking about, oh, if I put this, and this in here, then I'm going to have roots that are going to be like 3 feet down. And if I use this, and this, they'll only be like 4 to 6 inches, but these will be like somewhere in between. And with all of that, you will have an extremely healthy ecosystem. Once you have brought that healthy ecosystem back, you can just get out of the way, which was the other thing when I was talking about soils. I avoided soils. Once I realized that all you need is soil and hydrology and the plants take care of themselves, that was the best thing ever, because I was always chasing either a pathogen or an insect or something with the plants that they weren't flowering like my clients wanted to. There was always something going on. Once I started just fixing the microbiome and restoring the hydrology, I didn't have to touch the plants ever. They just did their thing, which was the best part, because that's the part that the client really cares about. So why does all this matter? Well, 98 million acres of native vegetation have been replaced by managed landscapes. You've probably heard this stat before, but it's true, and it's something that we need to think about. It's the catalyst for homegrown national park. This equals all the land of our national parks and all the land used for corn production in 2014. So if you've ever been to a national park and been like, wow, this is a lot of space, this is huge. Nope, more than that. Studies have shown the use of non-native plants is linked to the decline in the abundance and diversity of insects. That decline is a result in the decline in the bird population. Most clients aren't going to really like the idea of meadows, or they might, They're starting to, as Nick said earlier on. Many clients may not love the idea of a vast array of insects on their property. So sell them on the birds. Sell them on the fact that 9,000 caterpillars to raise 5 chickadees. Sell them on the songbirds, because you're probably not going to sell them on the creepy crawlies. You'd sell me on the creepy crawlies, and there's probably some that'll like it. However, if you start selling people on the birds, that's another way to get into it. You also will want to educate your clients. I find one of the best ways that I land jobs is giving my clients little tidbits of information that they can then just go share at the office, share with their friends, whatever, whatever. So I talk to them about how birds in the spring need those caterpillars. So don't put your bird feeder out. There is no need for a bird feeder in the spring. They want protein. They want all that fat and they want all that seed for the winter. Again, basics, and you probably know this. However, if you relay this to a client and tell them that they can save money, if you can tell them that if you take away your bird feeder in the spring, those birds are going to have to eat all the things that are eating the plants, then they're going to be like, oh, all right, and they'll just take it in. They'll save money, they'll have a healthier garden, and they'll have a healthier bird population around them. That's a triple win, and they'll absolutely love you. The plants you choose could save a species, especially these 3 ladies right here. Now, I actually really do love the impact with a second grader when they say, what do you mean ladies? And I say, if you see a bee on a flower, it's a lady. And they're like, what about the boys? I say, well, the boys don't do any of that. And then we get into a little bit about male bees and female bees. And, you know, usually the girls are standing up and cheering and the boys are just standing there absolutely perplexed. But anyhow, I digress. Back to these 3 ladies right here. These 3 ladies in New England are all endangered or locally extinct. So the plants you choose could bring one of these or all of these back from being endangered, or you could reinstate a population that is locally extinct. You do not need to take this down because you can just go to Dr. Gagir's lab. The purpose of this slide is to show you that if you put in any one of these very simple plants, you throw in penstemon, if you throw in Monarda didma, like that you're putting in anyway because people all want to have their hummingbirds. So you're just throwing that in there. By throwing those in, you're supporting those 3 bee populations. And that's the beauty of it. And that's what I was talking about before. You can send your $20 to save that polar bear, and that's great. But for $20, you can buy one of these plants, and that will make all the difference in the world. Not only will you be supporting one of those three bee populations right there, but you could be supporting, 37, 40 other species of Lepidoptera and bees. If nothing's eating your garden, something's wrong. That's what we were talking about before. That's something, again, that you all know, but we need to be reminded of that. And we need to tell our clients that it's okay. Every single July, end of June, every single July happens because I have been doing the pollinator garden installation now for a long time. And so it's every single June or July, I get a phone call from somebody whose pollinator garden I put in the year before. And they're always like, Trev, there's caterpillars all over the place. My leaves are being eaten. Something's going wrong. What's wrong? And then you have to find a nice way to tell them that's where butterflies come from. So where do we start? Well, if you're new to natives, or if you're new to native combinations, I have done these 7 little gardens. There are 7 gardens on the Weston Nurseries website. If you go to the Weston Nurseries website, underneath native plants, you will see 7 gardens that I designed. There is a pollinator powerhouse garden. There's a pollinator endangered garden. There's a bird garden, a hummingbird garden, a hell strip garden, which is, for those that don't know, the area between the sidewalk and the street. So that gets peed on a lot, and there's a lot of salt. So there are plants that will live there. There are 7 gardens, 7 plant lists. Each one is designed for 100 square feet. In the digital image that you see here, the colors are actually the colors of the blooms. So you have an idea.
Is that
So
geotech?
can you guys please mute? Thank you. So if you go there, again, it's 100%, it's all free. It's wanting to put it out there. So, the purpose of everything that I do is to empower, educate, and inspire other people. And that's what this is all about. Now, yes, it is true. One of the reasons I got hired at Weston was to help develop their native program. And yes, we are growing every single one of the plants in these gardens if you are looking for them. so you don't have to go everywhere. However, if you are not from here or not near Western nurseries or just anti-Western nurseries, that's okay. And you can have the list for absolutely free. It will still have the same environmental impact. But how will all of this save the world? We'll get into it really quick, and we'll start with 5th grade. Like I said, let's take it back to the basics. How does it save the world? 95% of the Earth's heating and cooling is controlled by the hydrologic cycle. Well, what does all that mean, Trev? That means that through evapotranspiration, 25% of solar radiation is transferred back into the atmosphere. What does that do? That cools the planet. Through that evapotranspiration, we increase our local cloud formation rather than having heat islands and heat bubbles over our cities and over our land. So by increasing our cloud population, we'll say, we are reflecting 1/3 solar radiation back into the atmosphere, further cooling the planet. So plants need rain. We all know that. Rain needs plants. That evapotranspiration, that short water cycle. That's the water cycle that has been forgotten. It is the water cycle that is reaping all or causing all of the problems. So the short water cycle is the local humidity. The short water cycle is the rain shower, or the sun showers that we get in the middle of the summer. The short water cycle is the dew that you find on the grass and on your plants. The short water cycle is all that local humidity, those local clouds, those light fluffy clouds that are just right there. That short water cycle is the most nutrient water. That is the water that basically it keeps the Earth's skin hydrated. It's like a daily moisturizing routine for Mother Earth. So that short water cycle, though, because of our built environment, that water is evaporating and getting blown away, and it's not staying around locally. Think of it like winter drying skin. So we have our Earth drying out locally in many areas and in many ways because we've shortened or lost the short water cycle. The long water cycle is the one that comes off the ocean and dumps all the heavy rains and everything else. And that's fine. That's great. It's the short water cycle. It's that daily moisturizing routine that we have to get back to. So final thoughts. Again, this is a slide that I put in every single presentation pretty much. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. By plant shaming people, by environmentally shaming people or anything else, by telling people they're doing it wrong, they're just going to push back. What we need to do is we need to create successful landscapes, as our keynote was talking about, with birds all over the yard, with butterflies all over the yard, and have the neighbors want that too. We need to have beautiful meadows that people can approach, that people can interact with, and that people can start to understand. We have to educate our clients. We have to educate those around us. By doing this, then more people are going to adopt these methods. By telling people that their landscape sucks because they have exotic plants in it is not going to do it. And in fact, if there is somebody, this is where I start with all of my clients, because they usually say, Trev, I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of native plants. If you like your garden and it's full of exotics, okay, you know what? At least you're interacting with the earth. That's step one. That's a huge step because we've just stopped interacting with the earth. If you actually love your garden and love your plants, and yes, they're all exotics, well, now we have a place to go. If I have to get you outside to even know what the tree in your front yard is, that's a long way to go. So it's the whole plant shaming thing I'm not really down with. I am 100% into native plants, but I advocate for habitat creation. If you want the best example of creating a new model and making the old model obsolete, our cell phones. 100%, because we have our phones and then 2 years later we're like, wow, this phone stinks because the new phone is awesome. Tech does it to us all the time. We need to adopt that. We need to adopt that as an industry and just start making beautiful, robust, nature-filled landscapes that makes everybody else want them. I thank you all very much.
Well, thank
And I
you
would
very
like to
much,
give you-
Trevor. Yeah, I'm here with you. Thank you for sharing your experience with us today. We do have a few minutes for questions and answers. Trevor, are there any DIY tests that landscapers do to assess soil organic matter?
Again, I would go, so the DIY is really comes down to just digging up some of that soil and looking at it.
Yeah.
You're not going to get an exact percentage. You can do the jar test where you put some soil in a jar of water, shake it up, and let it settle out for about 24 hours. And all the organic matter will actually settle out on the top. So you get a mason jar, put some soil in there, shake it up like crazy, let it settle out. Once it's all done, the organic matter is going to be on the top. That's going to give you, I guess, the best way percentage wise. But again, I feel it's an intuition thing, and the majority of our landscapes, our managed landscapes, are relatively dead. You're going to have maybe a 4 or 5 percent organic matter if you've got a pretty good site. And if you can bump that up, like I said, just 1%, you're going to increase the water holding capacity, and you're definitely going to build that up.
Okay. One of our participants says, in my town, all rainwater needs to remain on the property. So one of the techniques that construction companies will use to accommodate this is, and it's been presented to village boards, is to use catch basins under the lawns. So I've seen where they'll pipe the roof water or the driveway water through pipes into a catch basin that's actually constructed underneath the lawn, that the water then percolates slowly from these basins and everyone is satisfied. How does that track with you?
So in some situations, dry wells are a solid method for stormwater control, in that if you need to have a lawn area, if you have a client that will not give up their lawn, if you need to have a lawn area, or if you're having trouble infiltrating the water, and let's just say you're not going to be able to do a rain garden or a bioswale, getting that water underground so it can perk is great. When you're installing a dry well, the biggest thing that you need to do, I would say, is size the dry well properly. Many landscapers just toss in one of those flow wells, which is about 50 gallons. And what's coming down the downspout is about 210 gallons usually. So it's instantly overwhelmed. So you need to size your dry well properly. You also need to make sure that that dry well is at least 2 feet above the groundwater so that the water filters properly. So dry wells, I don't hate them. They are certainly not a very sexy approach, but they are an effective approach to stormwater control, but you do need to be very careful with them.
Okay. Another participant asks, I'm curious to know what, if any, impact the presence of jumping worms have on carbon sequestration in the soil.
Oh, okay. I was hoping to jump on. So yes, there is an impact because jumping worms affect the soil and the soil life, the overall soil life so much. They do inhibit carbon sequestration. They eat through the roots. They eat the seeds of future generations. They weaken the soil, and also change the soil makeup, making it usually pretty calcified, which is wonderful for many of our invasive species. But they do, by weakening the plants, and you'll have weak plants, then you have disease-ridden plants because your plants are weak. You also have compromised soil structure, so it will not hold the water or hold any of the nutrients, let alone the life that it needs to.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed about them is that they tend to be most active, or they seem to have a tremendous impact on the top layers of soil, creating a more porous soil structure, more porous environment, which you might think is a good thing because it's incorporating oil, air into the soils, but it also makes a layer of soil that dries out very quickly. So in years like 2 years ago when we had that drought, that could be a real challenge for plants that have more superficial roots.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Another question is on the porous pavers. I've heard that porous pavers become less porous over time. Do you have any experience with that?
So yeah, I have lots of experience with that. And so porous pavers, permeable pavements, if not maintained, do become less pervious over time. So you need to maintain it, just like a rain garden, just like any stormwater system is a system, and it needs to be maintained like an HVAC system. It needs to be maintained like a car, if we want to use the car example. If you don't maintain it, then it will not work like it's supposed to. So, the permeable pavements need to have that joint sand changed out, just like you would change out the filter in your air filters in your HVAC systems. So periodically that all needs to be vacked out and replaced. So that is part of the maintenance for having that system. If you do not do anything to it, then yes, it definitely dwindles over time.
Well, I'd like to thank Trevor again for coming to speak to us today. He's been a great inspiration